Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Therapist Take podcast. We're going to talk about limerence and love addiction today, so don't go anywhere. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Josh.
You took your glasses
I had
off
to take
just
my
in
glasses
time.
off. I know. Phew. That means
can
I
leave
can't
it-
read the paper, but you know.
You can leave it up to me to call it out when you're trying to do it
Oh,
all
I know.
discreetly.
I know.
Ooh, yeah.
It's not exactly easy
Go ahead,
to
put them
hide.
on. Let everybody see.
Oh, yeah. I may have to read if we're going to read, if we read it. Yeah.
If you have room between your mic, the big
I
old.
know. I'll have to adjust.
So I have a question for you because we're going to talk about. This is going to lead into what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Have you ever been obsessed about anything? Like, can you think of? I mean, I'm sure you have. Like, I mean, everybody can get obsessed
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, I mean, I can get a little bit obsessed about things.
Anything recently or in
I did
something you
have-
got really obsessed about, and you're like, and looking back on it, you're like, man, I was a little kind of overkilled on that.
I go
a little
on
bit.
like rabbit holes of like research things, like
Mhm.
silly things. Like over in the summer, early summer, I was watching all these videos on YouTube about gardening, and then I started getting obsessed about pests and gardens, and then I'd go down rabbit holes about what are the pests, what's the etymology of, like, just stupid stuff. And I do
Right.
that about history. I'll watch something, I'm like, who was married to Prince so and so, and then I spend 3 hours, and I've been reading just stupid stuff like that. Yeah,
So
time sucks.
aside from love interest and family or kids or anything like that, have you ever felt like you got looking back on something that you got overly attached to something?
No, I'm thinking of like examples would be like people getting obsessed with, like bands and stuff in high school. Or
Yeah, that's
stuff
not
like
you
that.
though, huh?
No,
It's
I
not-
never had that.
Okay, I do.
Yeah, what's yours?
I am obsessed. I mean, I got overly attached
Currently?
to, somewhat.
Okay.
I got over. I think in the TV shows,
Uh-huh.
I got really attached to the cast or to the characters of Scrubs.
Yes, I know this.
And so when it went off the air, I had a really hard time with that. I mean, it wasn't a really hard time, but I missed it, And so when they came back on with the rewatch podcast, I was like, oh, yes. And then that ended recently. Well, they're still doing the podcast, but they're not talking about the show anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's only like 2 or 3 shows that I was like, I really got attached to the characters, and Scrubs was one of them, and then Suits was one of them that kind of came back on scene when it came on Netflix. But so I would love to see relaunches of both of those, obviously with the same cast. Right?
Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But yeah, I got a little I'm like, ugh,
Yeah.
a little attached.
Well, I mean, I guess I can go in themes of that, like The Crown for a little while. Like I couldn't wait to watch it again. And
Yeah.
Game of Thrones.
Okay.
I
But-
read all the books.
But
and
when it
then-
went off the air, you're like, oh, that was it. That was the last one.
Well, Game of Thrones was horribly disappointing.
Well,
right?
yeah,
So I
that's-
was angry. So it was an easier ending because I was angry.
Right.
But yeah, when it was over, I was sad.
Yeah. I'm actually not. I don't feel like I was over the top with it. Actually, like looking for the next show. This sounds like Limerence, actually. So I'm looking for the next show
next
that
show.
where the characters capture me like that
Yeah.
and draw me in. I haven't found it yet, but
Keep
I think
looking.
it's healthy to only not be a ton of those.
Yeah, not actually be obsessed.
But I think the ones that happen I think it's okay.
Okay.
I'm not. I don't think maybe
You didn't, like,
now.
not-
Now I'm wondering. Like,
Right. Did you not go to work or not
Yeah.
eat or not, go somewhere you're supposed
I'm
to
feeling
go?
really vulnerable right now.
Well, now I'm rethinking all of
And
my
Carrie's
stuff,
over
too.
there.
Am
She
I
puts her
not
glasses in her
obsessed
mouth.
enough? I don't do that.
I know. I'm just joking.
Okay.
That's how I see it in my head, though. When you're judging,
I'm not
You're
judging.
I
Oh,
know,
boy.
but I know you're not. But I'm judging me right now.
Okay, then put your glasses in your mouth.
But in my mind, you're judging me and your glass
I love how
and the
I'm-
rim of your
I love
glasses
how
are
my
in, my,
face
in your
is the-
mouth.
your fictional face of judgment.
Yeah, yeah, something you've never done.
Something I've
before.
always wanted was to be someone's imaginary judgment.
But it's something you've never done either, which is put the rim
Probably
in
not.
the
Probably not that
what
I
are
know
the
of.
what are the parts that go behind your ear called?
The earpiece?
The earpiece behind your ear or behind in your mouth. Well,
That's
why do people do
gross.
that? I don't wear glasses. I have good eyes.
Yes. You can take that swag at me.
I like doing that. And I'm 6 months younger. That's okay.
True.
Yep.
All true. All facts. Can't argue facts.
All right, we better get into what we're going to talk about
Our
today.
topic.
So this the questions or the conversation about obsession and attachment plays into our topic today of limerence and love addiction. So before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to do the typical housekeeping things in terms of liking and subscribing and sharing. Do all that stuff. That really helps with the algorithms. And if you're listening to this on the audio platforms, it takes 2 seconds right now just to stop what you're doing and like hit 5 stars, and then come back and listen to the rest of it. And so we really appreciate the reviews on that. So, okay. So, one more thing. Please also look in the description of this video, especially on YouTube, and then I'll put the same links in the show notes of the podcast. But there's a lot of resources I've included on this one, just so you have books and articles and blogs and a number of things like that. Therapist directories, things like that are available. Okay, so let me just kind of go over the breakdown of the episode. We're going to start out just by talking about what is limerence, first of all, and then kind of tie that into, is that different from love addiction? And then does childhood trauma play a role in this? So we're going to kind of look at the effects of childhood trauma and how that might work its way into limerence and love addiction. And then what do we do for help, basically? What do we do about this? And so that's going to basically be it. And so we'll do our best to cover all those and solve this problem.
Solve it.
All the problems.
Yep.
Yeah.
Easy.
That's what we're here for. Okay, so let's talk about this limerence thing. So I think it's probably just best we just start out reading the definition that I wrote down. So we'll put that on your screen. So it says that this comes from Psychology Today article, which you can also find in the description or the show notes. Limerence is a state of involuntary obsession with another person. The experience of limerence is different from love or lust in that it is based on the uncertainty that the person you desire also desires you. So what does that mean to you?
Crush.
Yeah. So in the pre-show discussion, you were saying that all of us experience limerence from time to time, or anybody can, and it's not necessarily pathological.
No, I don't. I think it's probably in some ways a rite of passage, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
That those first times that you start having romantic, intrusive feelings for somebody, right? And especially when it's early in your life and it's all new and it's powerful and there's no other map for it, and in your brain. So yeah, limerence is not a problem, just limerence in and of itself.
Right.
Right.
I think that like some level of it's even necessary for
Falling in love.
Sure. Yeah, right. Like, I mean, it's the cloud nine effect in a way, where if you want to, hopefully create a relationship that turns into what we would call a committed relationship, then you kind of need something to hold you in it long enough for that to kind of take effect. And I would think that's kind of the whole point of the cloud nine effect. And I think it was in one of the Patrick Carnes books, again, when we start talking about this, more resources come to mind. We start talking about other things that I don't have linked. But, when you talk about the cloud nine effect, that, you have in the early stages of a relationship, your dopamine levels are high, so that's your happy hormone, basically, right? Hormone. So it feels really good, and then your serotonin levels are low, in which I believe scientists have attributed to that to be the reason why we can't stop thinking about said person. So that's the cloud nine effect. So when you start out a new relationship, serotonin's low, dopamine's high, feels really good, and you can't stop thinking about them. Right, and then over a period of time, which I think is somewhere around, a year and a half to 2 years, those levels will even back out. And I'll always say that somebody wrote a song about that goes, "You lost that love and feel," but you really didn't. It just makes it better. It makes a better song than singing about dopamine and serotonin
No,
leveling out, right?
yeah, no one wants to do that.
But that's how some, when we talk about love addiction, we'll get into that. That's how, you know, that losing that love and feeling, which you're really not. It's just, it is a
Shift.
chemical thing happening. It's necessary for entering into the committed stage of a relationship, but it does freak some people out, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think everyone can agree that, feeling obsessed and driven to, pursue somebody else feels good, feels
Hmm.
pleasurable, and it's okay to be sad that
Right.
that intensity has an end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. But so so limerence can be pathological. We talked about that it also is a symptom of love addiction, but it doesn't necessarily. Someone can be in an unhealthy state of limerence and not be a love addict, and so
Right.
we're going to talk about that
Right.
in just a second. But so, what would you see as like uh, unhealthy limerence aside from somebody attaching to somebody who's not their partner? I mean, that would be obviously unhealthy.
Right.
But let's just talk about single person experiencing an unhealthy level of limerence with another single person.
Well, I think the intensity and is one. So if it's so intense that you can't do anything but be obsessed with that person, right?
Hmm.
Then it's one of our diagnostic criteria is something getting in the way of someone's social, occupational, and daily functioning, right?
Hmm.
So if you are so overwhelmed with your thoughts and your feelings about this other person, you can't perform your regular duties, it's costing you in other relationships of your life, then that's problematic, right?
Right.
It's normal, like for students' grades to drop, right, when they first start falling in love, right, or
Right.
forgetting to turn things in, or testing the boundaries and coming home late, right, or being a
Hmm.
young adult and like your job performance isn't as great, you stay up too late, going tired. Those are, I think, normal boundary pushers.
Right.
That's part of limerence. But I think when you start seeing severe things, right,
Hmm.
that's one indicator that
Right.
it's
So
an
like when
alarm
it
bells.
becomes the when it's prioritized over everything
Right.
else in life,
That
basically.
level of
Yeah.
intensity, right.
Yeah. And by the way, like when I experienced limerence when dating my wife, my grades went up.
Oh.
Yeah, because if I wanted to spend any time with her, it was studying. And so I
Ah.
made straight A's for the first time since like grade school for 2 semesters
Nice.
in a row in college. So
Man, that was
yeah.
a good indicator,
Yeah,
right?
so it's like she was like, "Well, if I'm
Which
going
is
to be
good for
there,
you.
I guess I'm not just sit here at a table and watch her study. I better break a
I
book
guess
out."
I'll do it too.
I'm like, what is this
We're
book?
such social creatures, aren't we?
I know, I
What do you
know.
think is another bad or warning sign of limerence?
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me because I did do some reading up on this just to kind of see what other people were saying about it, and something I didn't really think about is how important this aspect of uncertainty is. Like, in fact, someone, and I can't remember which article I read, said like it has to be, for it to really be limerence, some level of uncertainty has to be involved in it. But when it becomes basically pathological, it's an obsession really about the uncertainty. Like it's a drive to experience the high of the uncertainty, and the uncertainty is like does this other person feel about me the way I
Way
feel
I feel
about
about
them,
them.
right? And the answer is almost always no. Like it almost always ends in sadness or agony for when it's in extreme form, sometimes indifference. But but there's really this drive to that feeling that comes with not knowing, and then sometimes the person will give them some glimpses of maybe they might be interested, and that even hits it hard. That creates just enough dopamine to like really keep them driven in that area. So it kind of made me think of a quote by I think I once read it was George Bernard Shaw, but I actually think it's first quoted by Oscar Wilde, where he said that there are two tragedies in life. One is to never get your heart's desire, and the other is to get it. That's kind of what it made me think of.
Okay.
Is like this person really is hooked on the journey, and so
Makes me think of like I read a book and I can't wait to get to the end. And then as I get close to the end, I'm so sad. And I
Right.
slow down because I don't want it to be over.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just
Yes.
it's not quite this, the
Yeah.
uncertainty in the limerence, right? If you find out that they do or don't have shared
Right.
feelings, right, then it's over.
Right. I don't want to digress because I want to talk about books and authors now that have
Oh,
where you that don't end books very well or they have a trouble with it. But
no, if I
we can
really,
bypass that right
okay,
now.
well, that's later.
Yeah, we do
Okay.
it. So I did like in the resource livingwithlimerence.com. And I believe this guy has actually written books about limerence, and but in comparing it to love addiction, he said, limerence is would be better described as a person addiction. So they are obsessed with the limerent object, which is the person, and then the desire, a deep desire for reciprocity when it comes to um, desire, desiring them in return,
Right,
you
sure.
know. Um, but as we were talking about, and we can move into the next point, is that um, most love addicts probably experience limerence
Yes.
pathologically.
Right, right.
Yeah.
They kind of keep the idea, anything with addiction is going to have the addiction cycle, right?
Right.
That buildup of tension that leads to the escalation, right, of
Hmm.
craving, right? And then you engage in those addictive behaviors and patterns, right? There's some
Right.
relief, and then the tension builds again, right? So
Right.
that addictive, you're going to see that addiction pattern here in love addiction too. It may look different than a substance addictive pattern or even, sex.
Hmm.
But that pattern is what I think can take something from limerence, which is a state,
Right.
right, with a beginning and end, and is probably pretty normative, to a love addiction pattern and cycle that's repetitious.
Yeah. Love addiction is fascinating to me, first of all. Let me give a definition of that,
Yeah,
and then
good.
we'll keep chatting about it. So if we could put that on the screen, this also actually comes from that same website, livingwithlimerence.com. I just really like how he very succinctly said it, I guess. It's a very nice definition. He said, love addiction is most commonly defined as compulsively seeking the experience of falling in love and craving the feelings of euphoria and elation caused by connecting romantically with someone new. So, this is a fascinating concept to me, especially in experiencing and working with clients.
Right, sure.
So we typically have seen or understood love addiction as kind of being under the umbrella of sex addiction.
Right, right.
Excuse me. But it definitely takes a different form, and it's also
Yeah.
mostly attributed historically to something women experience. But I have seen a ton of men
I know.
that deal with love
Yeah,
addiction.
yeah, I
So
agree.
I don't even think it's like, I don't think it's like the difference of like how we see like there's men watching porn versus women watching porn. There's a large, astronomically larger percentage of men doing that.
Right.
But I don't know if it's like that with love addiction.
I don't either. I don't either. Because I can think, I don't know, I can't count, but I'm thinking of men clients and thinking of
Right.
female clients, sure.
But in essence, one way we've always described it as love addiction is being in love with love.
Sure.
And so that's a way to kind of think about it. And I just think that's really interesting because I also heard a philosopher saying, you might remember who this is. I don't remember. It said something like that. Love happens in our imagination,
Yeah, I
anyways.
can't remember who says that, but yeah.
Which is interesting because when you really think about that, like if you were to ask me, like, Josh, does your wife love you? I'd say, yeah, she loves me. At least I think she loves me. That all the indicators for how I understand love are there. But does she really love me? I don't know. I guess she's really the only one that can answer that. But it feels like love to me. So where's that happening?
In your imagination.
In my imagination, right?
Right.
And so
Sure.
it's definitely not a very romantic thing to say,
No,
right?
right.
Like,
Kind
you
of
tell somebody,
deflating, right?
like, what if your husband said, "Hey, Carrie, I love you," and you're like, "Well, that's only happening in your imagination."
Sure, right. Again, it takes the air or the wind out of the
I
sails for
know, like it's
sure,
like,
right?
whoa,
Aw,
like yeah. So a
boo.
lot of this stuff, by the way, as you dive into like the complexities of human relationships, the
Right.
complexities of love, and it's a lot of unromantic
It is.
things.
It is.
Really, so it's
Sure.
not Jerry Maguire, that's for sure.
No, it's not.
And this is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does limerence and love addiction, from your view, work together here? Or
I think limerence is a part of love addiction. I think that there's this, maybe even, we talked about neurotransmitters. I think that it's that pursuit of that feeling of obsession that people want over and over and over. They want it for themselves, and they want to create that imaginative story in their head of that, I'm pursuing this person, and what if they feel the same way about me? And then what will that say about me, and how will I feel in that addictive
right,
pattern, right? And I do think there is a craving,
mm-hmm,
right? Again, an important word when we're talking about any use of the addiction model, right?
right, yeah,
So limerence does not necessarily mean you have a craving,
right,
right? But
yeah,
I think that's limerence, that desire to
yeah,
pursue can be a part of
right,
the addiction, the love addiction
yeah,
pattern.
yeah. I think limerence in its pathological form, there's a craving for, there's like a kind of a thirst,
Yeah, that's a good
like
word.
for desire, feeling desired,
Mm-hmm.
feeling loved, and I think that's how it. Oops, that's how it transitions into,
Yeah,
or at least becomes a part of love addiction.
sure.
And so
Yeah.
I like how this author, or this quote that I have again from Living with Limerence, said that if limerence is the psychological state of unfettered infatuation, love addiction could be the craving to re-enter that state as often as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So love addiction very much is about the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're literally hooked on a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas someone who's experienced limerence, they are hooked on the limerent object.
Yeah. Right. The person.
Right? But there's still obviously feelings there, because they're wanting
Yes.
to know if this person desires me like I desire them. And then I think in its pathological form, that can, excuse me, in its pathological form, that can turn into um, love addiction,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm just trying to feel, I'm chasing that feeling of
Right.
euphoria or intensity.
Consumption.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too that you can see, I think even diagnostically, kind of like limerence, and then if you're to think of it kind of as a continuum, right, or something, and getting into that more troublesome addictive
Yeah.
patterns that
Yeah, that's a good way to
if
think of it.
people struggle too with, that falling in love and that feeling of limerence, and then they get a relationship, and then kind of the bottom falls out of that relationship, right? Statements like, I just don't feel the same way. I love them, but I'm not in love with them.
Right.
I mean, everyone has had that experience, but for it to be something then that relationships fall apart over and over and over, and then a
Right.
new one comes in, and because you're chasing that limerence again.
Right.
I think again, put that on kind of a continuum, right?
Right.
I mean, and even add another layer of developmental psychology. Being younger, maybe you're going to chase that intensity, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
as you get older and your brain gets stable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So much the idea of chasing the intensity,
Mm-hmm.
you're more willing to understand that shifts, and then love becomes different.
Yeah.
But the partnership and the stability also has a value to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do think the bottom falls out though in their minds, in
And
the
that's
healthy
again
relationship.
and healthy, but I think that how intense that bottom falling out again on that continuum
Yeah.
can indicate something being limerence, a developmental
Right.
norm, all the way then up to maybe
Yeah.
becoming that troublesome patterns.
And let me rephrase that. I don't want to say in a healthy relationship, because if that's something somebody battles with, a relationship probably isn't healthy in that sense. But it's that going back to the losing that love and feeling. The relationship has to transition into the next phase to create
Right.
the type of relationship that where you can do life together for a long period of time.
Sure.
And it's walking around just being on cloud nine about our partners, means a lot of other things are going to go
You
neglected,
bet. That's right.
and
Sure.
because we were not going to care,
Mm-hmm.
about as many other things. And so we have to make that transition. But what happens with the love addict is they feel abandoned,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know,
That's important to say.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And um, so for them, when they're experiencing what might be just a normal relational developmental process, to them feels something like something's wrong,
Right. Yes. Yes.
you
The
know?
alarm bells go off.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so love addiction can manifest in a lot of different ways
Yes, it
in terms
can.
of like, for some people, they have their married partner, their committed relationship, and that becomes kind of the bookend, like, or the the object of reality, like that this is real. And then I can do my love addiction thing in my fantasies with other relationships. And those people will often go through or have multiple partners, but sometimes not. Sometimes they just have one or two. Because one thing that we see when we're assessing for love addiction is we're looking for relational patterns. So, like in
Right.
other forms of sex addiction, or sexually compulsive behavior, people are not necessarily whining and dining people. They're not interested in the history of people's lives and wanting to pay their bills and be as involved. Like it on there's often emotional affairs in this part of
Yeah.
when it comes to love addiction. There's this whole, it really does reflect this whole other relational life.
Mm-hmm.
And then when those relationships end, sometimes that person can will feel devastated by it.
Right.
It can send them into it can make them spiral down into where their
Mm-hmm.
safety's even in question. And sometimes it's just on to the next one
Mm-hmm.
because that relationship is starting to experience it's starting to experience the
This.
developmental thing where it's not I'm not able to get the level of limerence
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that I'm seeking,
Right.
and so sometimes the love addict ends the relationship and moves
Mm-hmm.
on to the next
To pursue
partner,
the
right?
next. Yeah.
So, so it's a very complicated phenomenon. I'm very fascinated by it. There's not a lot of reading material out
Yeah.
there on it.
Yeah.
Pia Melody
Pia Melody has some
and
good
Kelly
stuff.
McDaniel has a
Right.
book,
Right.
but
But I think too the other word, it it does create emotional turmoil, right?
oh goodness,
It's
yes,
very distressing,
yeah.
right? It is that those feelings of abandonment and fear and depression and
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, right? Those are often something that bring people actually into treatment. It's not often
Mm-hmm.
that they're coming in and saying, I think I have this pattern around chasing the next high and romantic close relationships, right? It's often I'm really anxious or I'm so depressed that
Mm-hmm.
brings people into treatment because the emotional turmoil
Right.
of this repetitious costly pattern is costing them and they're feeling really discombobulated emotionally.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Um, so where where does this come from?
Yeah,
I
good
mean, that's
question.
kind of the thing we need to dive into. And I know this is going to be kind of cliche because it's like
I know.
we're going to see this like in terms of obviously if we have a main point that is, does my childhood trauma play into this? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And then people are like, does this mean my mom didn't hold me enough when I was a kid? I'm like, yes. Metaphorically speaking, yeah, there's often some kind of love deficit
Sure.
that people experience, and how they're treated. And sometimes it's very subtle and unintentional. I think most of the time it's probably unintentional, but it can be very subtle. Like this can happen
Yeah.
in really good families, like
Yes.
where as a parent, I mean, I always tell people it's a crapshoot. Like, I mean, how we're messing up our kids, like, I mean, I worry about that too. And I know, like, that's the dad in me saying that. Like, the therapist in me is saying, look, like, this is something that all parents go through. There's uncertainty in how to do this.
Yeah.
There's no perfection. Kids will emerge from and launch from their homes with their own set of strengths and their own set of values and their own set of problems.
Yes.
And we just are left. Our job is to just give them a chance. But the dad in me is going, oh, man, I hope I'm not messing my kids up.
I know. What can I do? What can I do?
Right. Yeah. And and sometimes, even like I said, in the best of families, you know, uh, unbeknownst to the parent, there's a kid that's feeling a lot of feelings and
Right, right.
and related to something going on in the family or whatever, and but they don't know how to articulate it, you know, and so that's one of the worst parts about parenting is like you just like, "Ugh, if this baby could just talk to
I
me,"
know. I
and then
remember
they
that.
start talking, but they still can't articulate.
Yeah, I know.
Just another version
I
of
know.
crying.
Right. Yes. Yes.
That's all it is.
But I think too that this idea that it comes from it's just understanding that a lot of this is also back to those neurotransmitters. It's kind of a state of safety and a state of pursuit. And if you had early experiences where there wasn't a lot of or consistent amounts of safety, right? Then there is some version of your nervous system having trouble soothing, finding safety, or finding consistent safety, and using that state of limerence, that that addiction pattern over repetitious over and over and over to try and regulate yourself to getting to that sense of safety and security, right? Oh,
Right.
I'm safe. I'm because I'm in an attached relationship,
Right.
which is something that obviously we need, especially those first 3 years of our life, right? We
Right.
actually our life depends on a caregiver's quality of care.
Right.
And so it's hardwired in. And so this isn't just something that, hey, lady, hey, dude, quit choosing bad people, move on, right? You have to understand that this is something that is wired in. For most of people that actually are probably going to be on that high end of that continuum around love addiction, they're probably going to have some attachment issues, right?
Of
We've
course.
had
Yeah.
a podcast on that. They're going to have some anxious attachment patterns. They're going to even maybe have avoidant attachment
Oh
patterns.
yeah.
And we're going to be able to explore how that started. Usually, I mean, from birth, birth to three, somewhere in there. And this isn't because you came, like you said, from a bad home. It could be as much as your caregiver gets ill,
Right.
right? And who can do anything about that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or one of your siblings is ill, and all the attention has to be
Right,
focused on
right. I
them,
mean, there's all kinds
or
of,
traumatic events. Yeah.
right. Tornadoes blow your house
But
away, and
I think one that we often don't talk about that I think also can create this effect is the parent that is in tune with their kids and they're overprotective and they're helicopter
I
parents,
agree.
and
Yeah,
they bring them in and they are a source of safety and comfort,
right.
but they never allow them to get out and experience adversity, and so now then when they launch from that system, and then so what do? They seek out another partner that can be that for
There you
them,
go. Good point.
right? And then when it gets to the point of partners, I can't always be that, so I have to. We have our own kids, we have jobs, careers, we have
Right.
life, or I have a family member that's sick, I need to go tend to them, or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like, what about me,
Yeah,
right?
the panic.
And so
Yeah,
it's like the same effect because I think the same is true. Like if on the other extreme of that, for the parent that isn't around, the parent that isn't safe or nurturing, then the person launches from that home. What do? They go find someone that can be
yeah.
safe and nurturing, right? And
Right.
so trying to find the balance. That's the task of every parent, and no one's going to do that perfectly.
Right. Right.
But like if you're listening to this and it's something that you feel like is happening to you, like wait. I do fear abandonment. I do, have a hard time when going lengthy periods of time without
Right.
being around my partner, or I'm seeking other partners, and not just for, physical gratification, but for emotional gratification.
Right. Right.
It's something to kind of pay attention to. There might be something deeper going on that you might need to figure out
I agree.
and get some healing from. Um, there was something else about love addiction too that kind of I had it in my head and it slipped my mind, but it had something to do with um, the pursuit of how the pursuit of partners works. But if it comes back, I'll bring it back up. But I
Okay,
can't
good.
remember it. But it is something I'll
Well,
talk to my
I
clients
think
about.
too, we often will, I see often people attaching to a partner that's unhealthy for them.
Mm-hmm.
And this, what seems like pathological attempt to make that person enough or safe,
Mm-hmm.
even despite the consistent evidence, right? And so that's
Mm-hmm.
also something that you can look at an attachment style and say, where was
Right.
somebody inconsistent
Yeah.
early in your life, right? And
Mm-hmm.
history repeats itself a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Yeah.
this, and we're talking about this not because the healing does not take place in blaming the
Mm-hmm.
family that you grew up in.
Right.
The healing
Sure.
takes
Yeah.
place in sitting down and exploring these patterns so that you can become more aware,
Sure.
right? And if
Right.
you have people in your life that you do love and trust, and you're getting feedback from them that's, hey, you keep repeating the same thing in your relationships,
Mm-hmm.
or these multiple affairs that happen over and over and over. You just kind of seem to be ending up in the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
You keep trying to change somebody that's clearly not,
Right.
not keeping their end of the bargain of a healthy mutual
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's important feedback to take in and think, okay, let me explore
Right.
my journey, right?
So, can I mention something that I will talk to my clients about sometimes, and just kind of get your feedback on how you, if you agree or if you see it differently, or. But I really started thinking about this idea of abandonment, because this is a big piece of it, right? Is that feeling
Mm-hmm.
of abandonment, and and of course with the influence of IFS, which is the parts language. For people who don't know, IFS is a form of treatment, trauma treatment, where it focuses on the different parts. So like a part of me feels this and a part of me feels that, and they kind of coexist. Like there are multiple voices in my head in a good way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so in kind of thinking about the different parts of us, the adult me, like which I would say that's probably my true self, like what, the grown up, mature version of me, whatever that is. You can't, another adult can't make me feel abandoned. Like you can abandon me, that can happen, and I feel like I could be hurt by that in terms of, whether it's feeling betrayed or slighted or whatever, but abandoned, I feel like that's a child's feeling. That happens to our inner child. That happens to the part of us that is already hurting and feeling probably some level of abandonment.
Yeah.
And then this experience in our adult life is just the right type of stimuli that triggers it. And they say, I am feeling like I'm a child. I mean, you can't tell me, like, if anybody has experienced that feeling of abandonment, that doesn't feel like a childlike feeling, right? And
Yeah.
we've seen clients come in, and we've talked about this many times, where there's such a like this innocence to their emotions when they get
I
into
know.
that state,
Yes, it's true.
and it feels very childlike. And so
Yeah.
probably it's how I'm guessing maybe how the whole inner child work stuff started. Maybe, I don't know, because somebody's like, man, that's
Vulnerable,
like, right. It's a
youthful. Yeah.
very different type of vulnerability. I don't know. Did it?
No, I think that true. I think that's true. I think they could feel offended if you say, my married partner did not, or, they did abandon me. They agreed to stay
Right.
faithful and they didn't. And it's not about arguing the logistics of that, but
Yeah.
it is about that feeling of
Right.
abandonment. Probably if you ask people, I like to ask people, how old are you? Like,
Oh
what
yeah.
age would you
Yeah.
put that
Which we
feeling
do that
at?
sometimes.
Right. And mostly what do people say? 6,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Because it's a very
It's a very you right.
right.
It's that feeling of
Yeah.
going to school for the first time and not knowing
Right.
exactly when and how you get home because you don't understand how the world works outside of your
Yes.
trusted safe
And that's
person.
I like to also think from like an evolutionary point of view, like that's a very functional
Yes.
feeling.
Yes,
Like
it
I
is.
believe that all feelings have a purpose, but sometimes our brain thinks we need to feel something that's not appropriate for the context. So, like, if I'm a kid and I have been abandoned, I need to feel every bit of that for my survival, because
Yes.
that's telling me I'm unsafe.
Right.
I'm potentially in danger.
Right.
There is no big person around to protect
Mm-hmm.
me, and that does not feel good. And so I need to. But when you feel that
Mm-hmm.
as an adult, right, contextually, it doesn't fit. But that part of your brain doesn't pay attention to
Right.
context,
Right. Right.
at least that much. It's that I'm assuming that's probably the thalamus that
Mm.
just is scanning the environment, looking for stimuli that's just reminiscent of some
Danger.
original threat,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, but it's like it doesn't even have to even be close to the same. It just has to be a little the same.
Right.
And so
Right.
it's like, so my partner leaves me, and the thalamus is like, well, that's a little the same. I
Problem
mean,
here.
so
Yeah.
I don't want to risk you dying.
Right.
So I'm going to create this feeling, and I say, you feel like a child in your
Right.
adult life,
Right.
So it's
Sure.
a very interesting thing that happens to us, but I think that's also a sign that there is injury there, and
Yes. Yes.
one of the best things you can do for your current relationship or any future relationship is to not, as you said, like blaming parents, but not to put that on anybody else.
Right.
Like,
Right.
yes, you can be upset and hurt that your partner abandoned you and you feel betrayed.
Mm-hmm.
All those
All
feelings.
those
But
feelings.
when
Right.
that feeling of abandonment hits, I feel like there's something else there. At
Mm-hmm.
least I would at
Oh, well, I
least be
think I
curious
would
about
just
it.
say what that feeling of abandonment. What it may exist in this relationship because of the betrayal, and where
Hmm.
else could that be? Right, just alongside. It doesn't have to
Right.
be in your childhood only. Right, we're therapists. We very
But
rarely
it
are looking
is.
for exclusions. Right. What
Well, sure. Yeah. I
But
mean,
but when
there's a
we
definitely.
right when we
Right.
think about where maybe it comes from,
Hmm.
it's going to be like hitting on that same,
Yeah.
that same history.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it again, it's a functional feeling that we need to have. That I would say, like, I kind of think of it as kind of, it lies dormant, ready to be activated to protect us when we're young.
Mm-hmm.
So just because some people have never felt that feeling, overtly,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the body has always
Is
been
always ready.
prepared
Mm-hmm.
to send that signal to the brain, and so
Yeah.
I it it's more about where it contextually
Is it
is
right?
belongs, right?
Right. Sure.
So I mean, it's all theoretical to me. It's just something I've spent some time thinking about. It's how
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense to me,
Mm-hmm.
because I like to think about when someone's
Has a
experiencing an
function.
emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, like, I truly believe the brain has a purpose for that is meant to be helpful.
Or at least survive for your
Right.
survival.
Right. And if that's the
Mm-hmm.
minimal amount of help is to keep you alive,
Yeah.
then that's
Then that's
it.
it's doing its job. Yeah.
You know. So we kind of delved in that conversation into treatment, into the question of what do we do about it, and of course, we're therapists.
Yeah.
You know what we're gonna say,
Yeah.
go get therapy,
Mm-hmm.
but again, kind of how we reflected last time when we were talking about this, you know, that's the golden standard there. If you can go work with somebody that knows this world of
Yeah.
limerence and love addiction and then childhood trauma. There's
Mm-hmm.
also, I put a link to the ACEs assessment.
Yeah.
You can take the ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. A lot of research done on that. Um, but I think you touched on it in one of the things you were saying is like self-awareness. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
don't need a therapist
Right. Thank
to
goodness. Right.
become
Right.
self-aware,
Right.
right? You just have to be willing and intentionally paying attention,
You have to decide that you're going to learn how
right?
to focus your attention on
Hmm.
that. Yeah.
So what that means, like, you can't just chalk things up to, this is, it is what it is. One
Right.
of my
Right.
biggest pet peeve expressions, right? It is what it is. Because I'm like, yeah, it can't be anything other than what it is. That's true for everything. But
Mm-hmm.
I get why people say it,
Yeah. Right.
It's kind of a nice transition out of a topic onto
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
Um, but you have to be careful about using those expressions. It's like, well, that's not how I was raised, and this is just how things are, or
Mm-hmm.
in this day and age,
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that, where and really start asking harder questions of like, I wonder why I feel that
Right.
right now, or
Right. Where's that coming from? What's that about?
right, why am I so afraid of this?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
What's this repetition about? Right.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I like how Michael Singer in the book The Untethered Soul, when he's talking about loneliness, and he's using this as an example. He's like, most of us can understand the feeling of loneliness. We've all had it, but he's like, when you think back on a time when you were feeling lonely, there was a point before that where you weren't. And he's like, what happened? Like, 2 seconds ago, you were just fine. What happened? And he's not, I don't think it's a rhetorical question, or that he's being facetious or anyway. I think it's a question that he really wants you to answer.
Answer it.
What did just happen?
Mm-hmm.
Why was I sitting here and I was perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden this feeling of loneliness just came over me?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question.
It's a good question. It's what meditation and mindfulness is trying to help you do too.
Sure.
Right.
And the answer is going to be different for everybody.
That's right. That's right. It's your own.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So one more thing I wrote down in terms of things we can do um, is when it comes to self-awareness is that after when you're kind of, I think that's where it starts. I think even you have to be somewhat self-aware to even know that you might want to get therapy.
Yes, I think so.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's acting on it, which is self-care.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
going, so I know I need therapy, it's self-awareness. Going to get therapy is a form of self-care,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a lot of other things you can do.
Right.
And to be intentional with is that I think I might need to take care of myself more.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might, and I think a lot of that is just saying no to a lot of things.
Sure. Sure.
Well,
Well, I think so too. I always encourage people when they're talking about self care, you start with the foundation, right? The basics, the bottom of the pyramid:
mm-hmm.
sleep, nutrition,
Sure.
exercise, sunlight, healthy human interactions, right?
Yeah.
And you do that thing, and you can probably do almost all the other things.
Right. And so there definitely is a doing component, but in order to do those things, like let's say exercise, for example,
You have to say
I
no.
have to say no to something else that I
Mhm.
was going to do
Yeah.
first. Now, what do I do after that?
You
You
go
can-
right back to your
let's start.
obsession with
Let's
scrubs.
just start with the
You have to
no.
put scrubs down and
Yeah,
go
yeah.
exercise.
I love. Hey man, scrubs got me through the pandemic. By the
Okay.
way,
Well, see, even more endeared to you. Then.
yes,
Yeah.
even more embedded. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Scrubs and Cougar Town. Just about anything Bill Lawrence makes,
Mm-hmm.
I love. So, but yeah, so it's start with the no, and then it's then what. Yeah, you're going to be faced with then what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you'll just have to kind of piece together.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you can get help with that, that's hey. By the way, like I would say, you can find community
Yes.
without having to go see a therapist.
Yeah.
Another thing,
Right.
So don't think of getting help as that the only way I can do this effectively is to go see a therapist. We've had plenty of people that we're working with, and one of the things we try to get them to do is create community,
Right.
because it's even hard for us for the work they're doing with us to be effective without
Right.
the support
Sure.
around them. So,
Right. It's a basic. Yeah.
right. So did we cover everything
I
on
think we did
limerence
it.
and
Love addiction
love addiction?
and childhood trauma.
I was really excited about doing this, and then as we started to do it, that excitement started to wane, and I feel like I need to
Need another hit.
a little limerence, a little meta limerence.
Okay. Okay. Try and find that.
Limerence of limerence. We're such nerds.
I know.
We could nerd out about this stuff.
I know.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here. Again, please just take 2 seconds and go, 5 stars. Or if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do that. And we are in a season where we're having some of our Friday. We usually broadcast 12:30 on Fridays, and we try to do it every week. But then we're kind of in a season of our professional life where Fridays are kind of getting taken up, so we might be hit and miss there for a little bit. But
Right, we'll do our best.
Yeah. I appreciate everybody. Thank you, Carrie.
Mhm.